Hello, book lovers and English learners. Welcome to episode 27 of the podcast Reading English. And today I have the absolute pleasure to receive the lovely Emma Quinn in the podcast. She is an interior designer and life coach from Ireland, Northern Ireland, sorry. And we met last year when we were attending the same conference about money mindset and everything in Bristol. And since then, we have stayed in touch. So when I learned that Emma had released a book, I instantly jumped on the occasion to have her on the podcast. I think you actually the first official guest on my podcast. So I'm very happy. So I instantly jumped on the occasion to have her on the podcast to talk about her amazing book, Life by Design, a guide to overcoming anxiety and living your best life. I believe that her book and our conversation today will be very helpful to people, and I hope that it will inspire you as it did with me. So thank you for everyone who is watching this video and listening to this conversation. If you have any questions, you can drop the question in the chat box or in the comments below this video. I'll be happy to answer you after the conversation, and we will we're going to start the conversation now. So, you are starting your book by mentioning an Irish saying, you're in everything but the crib. Do you remember?
Yes, I
And
do.
yes. So can you explain to us the meaning, especially if you're not first of all, if you're not a native speaker of English, and also if you're not Irish and you don't, I don't know if in England they use this expression or is very typical.
Maybe not so much
Yeah,
in England. Yeah, I probably should have
yeah.
thought about this, explaining it a bit better.
Oh
I
no, it's
think it's
fine.
very niche saying,
Mm-hmm.
maybe not even all throughout Ireland, but where I'm from, it's kind of a saying. I think it goes back to like in Ireland, a lot of the Catholic schools, like what I went to, primary schools, have a nativity Christmas play. So, like the nativity, the story of
Yes, yes,
baby Jesus,
yes.
all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think that's where the term comes from, like the crib where baby
Mm-hmm.
would have been born. It's kind of refers to someone who is so busy, like they're everywhere you could imagine. So they're everywhere, but the crib is I don't know, it doesn't really make sense, but
Yeah,
it's
they have
funny.
it's like the headless chicken that is running
Yeah.
around,
Yeah, maybe that's a
and
better, yeah.
this is
Better
the
metaphor. Yeah. Yeah.
it's kind of, but I quite like it. I mean, it's very, I would say, related to, I don't know, but you can use this expression to men or women.
Yes,
This is
yeah.
the same. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's kind of it refers back to babies and looking after the family, but it's a funny one. Yeah, I quite like it.
But thank you for pointing that out, that it's maybe not that relevant in other parts of the world.
No, but I mean it's part of who you are and about part of your identity as well. And I think it makes it very. I liked when you talked about your life in Ireland and how people's beliefs and how you live, how people think over there, which is different from maybe another part of Ireland or the rest
Mhm.
of Europe or the rest of the world, whatever. So it's interesting to understand the context of where you come from as well, and to see how you kind of detached a little bit yourself from from culture and traditions and things like that. My second question is now, how did you get the idea of writing? How did the writing of the book come about?
Yeah, so I think I sort of told like probably a good bit of the story in the book, but when I was going through, for anyone that
Mm.
hasn't read the book, I'll try and keep this brief so I don't take
Yes, yeah.
time. But my daughter was born back in
Mm,
May 2020, during the first COVID lockdown, which I'm sure everyone remembers. Quite a tough time for everyone. But back then, as I said at the start of the book, I was one of these really overly busy people. I had so much going on, and the outside, it looked like I had everything together.
mm,
But when my daughter was born, I actually really struggled. And I don't know if it was because of the isolation with the COVID lockdown
mm.
or becoming a new mom or a combination of things. But I really struggled with postnatal anxiety, with insomnia and birth trauma. And my way of dealing with this was really to just throw myself back into being as busy as possible. Like I didn't really take much of a maternity leave. I think I took 3 months maybe, and then I was back. I was back exercising like crazy. I was building a new home. I was just trying to keep myself distracted from these feelings.
Mm.
So this went on for about 8 months, and it got to the point where I wasn't sleeping at all. And I was crying every day. And I really just felt like this, I knew there was something more than just feeling a bit emotional after having a baby, which is kind of what midwives and doctors and things have been telling me. So one day,
Mm.
I had my daughter and my little dog out for a walk, and I just broke down crying. And I think it was probably the lack of sleep and just all of these emotions that I wasn't dealing with. I wasn't talking to anyone about it, that I was trying to bottle up. It wasn't working anymore. My strategy for dealing with this wasn't working anymore. So I came home and called my health visitor. I'm not sure if you have that in France, but it's basically like, it's kind of like a nurse that would, like a community nurse that would help
Mm.
women after giving birth, the few
Mm-hmm.
months after, and they would come out and do home visits and things like that just to make sure everything's
Okay.
so it's a brilliant service that they do. So
Yeah.
I called her and she was amazing. She came out to visit me the next day, and I just was brutally honest. She was the first person I told about how I was feeling.
Mm.
And she put me in touch with a amazing organization called Centered Soul, which was a local nonprofit. I think I had mentioned them in the book as well. So they
Yes.
offered counseling for women dealing with
Yes.
perinatal mental health issues. And then they also offered a monthly meetup group they had a couple of different groups, but the one I joined was for birth trauma. So I started doing the counseling. It was all online back then because it was still COVID times, and I did
Mm.
the online meetups. And within I'd say a few weeks of doing that, I began to see that there was kind of light at the end of the tunnel, and this was I was actually getting the help I needed. So while I was doing that, the counseling, I began, like the first few weeks were quite difficult, but then as the weeks progressed, I began to see a real change in my mood and my mindset and my outlook on life. And I began to actually look forward to my counseling sessions every week. I know
Mm-hmm.
that sounds strange. Some people are probably
Yeah.
be for them, but it just felt so nice to have someone to speak to because, I don't know about you, but back then especially, it just felt like the whole world just shut down and
Mm.
you had no one really to talk to. So
Mm.
I was inspired by the progress I was making in my counseling sessions. So I took it upon myself to kind of make it my mission to do everything I could alongside that, to help me to get back to feeling like myself. So I actually found that there were loads of other online things available, and most of them were free. So I was doing lots of different exercise classes, but not in the intense way that I had been doing before. Like I was doing yoga and Pilates and things that weren't, maybe as quite as intense. I was doing mindfulness. I did meditation. I did EFT, which is emotional freedom technique. I did color breathing. I did a gratitude and journaling workshop. And I even accidentally signed myself up for a senior citizen Tai Chi class ran by a lovely lady called Doris. So I was like, so I kind of it maybe wasn't, the healthiest thing to be obsessed with overcoming anxiety, but I felt like I was going about it in a lot more healthy of a way now, if that makes sense. I wasn't
Mm,
sort of took a break. I took a step back from work. I wasn't doing as many hours and things like that. And I really focused this time on myself and my self-care. So by the time this went on for maybe the next 3 months, and by the time my counseling sessions had finished, I just felt like a completely different person. I didn't even feel like I was back to myself. I felt like I got back to myself and then I kept progressing because I kept up all of these healthy habits and I just felt better than I had in years. And I kind of had the confidence then to start opening up to friends and family about what I had been going through because I think
mm,
before that I had this like shame around it. Like I, was the only person dealing with this and I didn't want to burden other people, with this. Like all the people have their own things going on and it would be selfish of me to, try and like dump this on family and friends. But whenever I had gone through this, I had a bit more confidence. So I started opening up to family and friends and telling them about my experience. And to my utter shock, nearly all of them had gone through something similar
huh,
or they were currently struggling with something. So maybe not exactly, the birth trauma or anything like that, but most of them had anxiety at one point, whether they were going through it right then or they had, gone through it before, or depression or insomnia, or there was
mm,
something, everyone had an issue, but they all felt the same as me. They were like, oh, but I can't talk about it. I
mm,
can't tell anyone. So this was like a light bulb moment. I was like, why are more people not talking about this?
yeah,
Like, we're all going around suffering in silence when a lot of the time maybe you don't need to do anything as drastic as I did. You might need counseling, you might need to do this, self-care boot camp journey that I did. But even simply talking to someone, like
yeah.
telling your friend or someone how you're feeling can be so incredibly therapeutic, I think, for both people, because then it gives others permission to open up to you.
Yes, yes, that's so
Yeah.
true.
So
Mm,
I just felt so inspired. And then I felt like I had all of this information. I got back into reading self-help books, which was a huge passion of mine before this. And I felt like I had all of these resources and techniques and tools that I had learned, but I didn't want to keep them to myself. I wanted a way to share them with other women or people that were going through something similar. So I just got out of the shower one day and I had this idea that I was going to write a book about it. Now, I'd never
mm.
written anything in my life before.
Yeah.
I had said it's my school days were probably the last time I wrote anything like this. So I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I just knew that the passion was there and
Yeah.
that would be all that I needed to get this out in a book form. And if it could help even one other person, it would all be worth it. So yeah, that's kind of where the idea
Yeah.
comes.
And the next step, how did you get into the writing? Did you have someone guiding you throughout the writing, or like how do we call people proofreading, or someone that a professional?
Yeah, so I think I had one final session with my counselor after coming up with this idea for the book.
Mm,
And I had told her about it and I was so excited. But my only kind of hesitation was that I've had big ideas in the past and I feel all excited and motivated for the first
hmm
few weeks, and then that would kind of dwindle and then I'd lose the motivation and I wouldn't follow through.
hmm
So I was telling her about this and she said, well, what about hiring a life coach to, hold you accountable?
hmm
So I didn't really know what life coaching even was back then. But as soon as I literally Googled life coach in my area and I hired the first person that came up. And it actually, probably not the best technique, but it actually worked out in my favor. She was amazing. So I had a weekly call with her and I told her my goals. I wanted to write a chapter a week. So she held me accountable for that. And then she was amazing. She actually helped me with the proofreading as well. And
hmm
then I also just kind of recruited my own little DIY proofreading team, aka my mom, my two sisters, and my two best friends. I don't know how happy they were about that, but they got roped into it.
Nice.
Yeah, it was nice. And I don't even know. So I sort of sent them a chapter every week and I was like, if you could read this and then send me back any comments. I don't even know if they read half of the chapter, but it was
Oh,
more
really?
it was more for me knowing that I have to do, it was kind of like a self-imposed deadline,
Hmm.
you know, but that really worked for me and that sort of held me accountable. So,
Yes. It's interesting to know how you, with the process of your writing, because people think that, oh, you have to do this on your own, but actually,
mm,
um, seeking help, of course, you need to have the budget for it,
yeah,
but I guess finding techniques to have someone that, or to make yourself accountable is a really good strategy, and you're not doing this on your own. I mean,
yeah,
not necessarily. You're allowed to seek help, and
yeah,
especially when it's the first time you're writing a book. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
yeah, and I wonder. So when we met last year,
yeah,
what at which point were you? Because you released the book in, when was it? The
yeah,
summer
July
in
this year.
July. So last year, at which point were you with the book? When because I remember that you were talking about it when we were chatting. I don't know, at some point you talked about it. I think I remember. Do you remember where, at which point
Yeah, I do.
had
Yeah.
you had finished the did you have
Yeah,
finished the
so
book
I
already?
actually, yeah, I did. I finished it. So I started writing it, let me see, about April 2021. So
Mm-hmm.
I actually had it finished by September that year. So it didn't take that long to write.
Mm-hmm.
But then, so I had the first draft finished by September, and then I hired an editor. So there was, I don't know the exact dates, but there was a lot of back and forth and revisions and things like that. And then I started like sending out book proposals to publishers. So that was quite a long process as well. It was maybe a year before I like secured a publisher. And then there were a couple of rounds of revisions with them. So yeah, it was probably 3 years in total. Um,
Wow.
but last year when I was speaking to you, it was near enough finished. It was just some final tweaks. And then I think the final manuscript was done the start of this year, like January, and then the graphics. So I, being this perfectionist, had to design all of the graphics myself. So
Yes.
that sort of took a bit of time as
Mm.
well. So it was completely finished by about March this year and with the publisher and ready to print and all that. So
Uh,
it was a process, yeah. And
uh,
I don't think if I had have known that going into it, I don't know if I would have been as excited because I sort of thought, oh, this will be ready in the next year, you know. But I think from speaking to other authors, it can be a bit of a process, especially when you're dealing with editors and publishers, and then doing proposals and things. It can be a bit of a drawn out process. And then
yeah.
I find as well, your motivation can kind of go up and down as
Ah.
time goes along, you know. So if you're not pushing it constantly, you know, it mightn't happen as quickly. So yeah, it was about 3 years in total.
Okay, so it's good to know actually for people who are maybe thinking about writing or publishing something, that you have to be ready for the ride. And
Yeah.
especially with the publishers, because now I get to know more and more authors around me because I do book fairs and things like that. And actually, it's a tough world,
Yeah.
publishing. And I do you feel that you've been heard by the publishing company, or do you think that are there things that you think that you will do differently next time?
Yeah, yes, I think I don't want to put anyone off writing a book by saying it takes 3 years. It doesn't probably normally, it's probably just because it was my first time and I didn't
Yeah.
really know what I was doing. I think if I was to do it again, I could do it a lot quicker, just understanding the process more. But the
Mm.
publishers, yeah, I went with a local publisher from Belfast here in Northern Ireland, and I'm glad I did that for my first print round because they were easy to deal with and good communication and customer service and all of that. But the only thing is they can't ship internationally, so that's obviously not great. You know, I like that book. I sent the copy I sent to you. I just mailed that myself to you. You know, it didn't come from the publisher, so
Yes.
I think it would be good to get that figured out and
Hmm.
Yeah, just a couple of little like logistics, and then
Okay.
I have also looked into self-publishing as well. But
Yes.
yeah, there's different issues around that because my book has so much color in it. I think that's kind of an issue. I think it would work out being very expensive to
To
print, like,
people.
yeah, to do it on like Amazon or something like that. So I don't know. I probably need to do some more research into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Tricky. Now on a different topic about your life, your work experience. So you mentioned that you worked in Canada, San Francisco, which you went recently, actually. Can you tell us about these experiences working abroad and how it shaped the future of your career?
Oh, yes. So I told a story in the book. I don't know if you remember this about when I first moved to Canada.
Yes.
And it was not quite what I envisioned. Um,
Mm,
to be honest, I was never like growing up, I never really thought I would move abroad. I was always quite quiet and introverted and liked my home comforts. It would have like terrified me, the idea of moving to a different country. But my now husband, my boyfriend back then, had
mm.
different ideas. He really wanted to move to work abroad after we graduated. And so in 2011, it was the time of the recession. So there wasn't really much work like in Ireland anyway. So he thought it would be good for us to move to Toronto. So I, at the time, was finishing off my master's. So he went out a few months before me and like got a house set up and all of that. And then I followed him out. And I had a vision board done. I had all these like skyscrapers on it. I had all these like successful business women, and I was envisioning like
Yeah,
I,
because you like vision boards, you love
I
them.
do, yes, I do. I love a vision board, yes. So I was envisioning myself to be like Carrie Bradshaw in Sex and the City, something like this.
As we
Having,
do,
yes,
of
having these
course.
like glamorous business meetings and, like cocktails for lunch and all this here. And, and just immediately jumping into this dream life. But of course, at 24 years old, it doesn't always happen that way. So I arrived and pulled up to the address that my husband had given me because he was working at the time I arrived. So I got a taxi and pulled up and I saw the house and I was like, no, this can't be it. I actually laughed. I was like, this is the wrong like address. This can't be it. There must be another like one of these addresses in Toronto. And the taxi man was like, no, sorry, like this is it. And I just like remember getting out of the taxi with my suitcases at the side of the road, being like, what is happening? Is this like for real? Um, yeah, it just was not what I was expecting.
Yeah.
Suppose like my husband was kind of in the same boat. He just started out. He had probably like minimum wage job. And
Mm,
I wasn't working at the time, so he like paid for my flights to come out, all of that. So we literally were starting off from scratch.
yeah.
We been in this like really ran down area. There was a crack den across the road from our house. Like it was not ideal. But I'm glad for that experience because like looking back, then it was totally like out of my comfort zone.
Mm.
I remember crying myself to sleep every night. And looking back now, I'm kind of like, oh, Emma, like catch a grip, like don't be such a
Mm.
baby. But back then, because I had been living with my parents and,
Yeah.
I think I just had this like cushy life that I never
Yeah.
really had to do anything that challenging for myself.
Mm.
So being thrown into that, and literally I think I moved there with 400 Canadian dollars in my bank account, which is not, I don't even know what that is in euro, but it's not much, to
Yeah.
start with.
Mm.
So I just remember like going for so many job interviews, getting rejected. Like I must have went for, I'd say between the time I lived in Canada, the different parts I lived in, and San Francisco, I probably had at least 50 job interviews,
Wow.
like crazy. Got so many rejections. I started so many
Okay.
different jobs that I hated or it just wasn't for me. But I'm so glad I did that because it
Hmm.
really forced me outside my comfort zone and it made it so that I became a lot more resilient and able to deal with anything that was thrown my way.
Mm.
So I'm so glad for that experience. And there were so many times when I just thought of calling home and, asking my parents to send me money or fly me back home. So many times I thought about that, but I'm so glad I didn't because I feel like I would have been just back to square one. And
Hmm.
I think then I'd say after about 6 months in Toronto, things really started to turn around. I got a really good job. I started making friends. I started, me and my husband got a nicer apartment. And then things just sort of took off from there and my confidence grew. So then
Mm.
moving to San Francisco, it was just amazing. Like the opportunities I had, like for my work in interior design and all of that. I'm so grateful for it now. So anyone who's listening, who's thinking of making the move, it can be very scary, but it's definitely worth it, I think, especially at a younger age, definitely.
Yeah. And so you got a job opportunity when you moved from Toronto to San Francisco. That's the reason why you moved, or?
Well, we actually moved from Toronto to Edmonton, which is Western Canada. So we moved there for a couple of years in between.
I see.
Yeah, and then we moved to San Francisco. My husband actually got a job offer in San Francisco then. So
Oh, okay. I see. And then you managed to find a job there.
yeah, yeah.
Quite. Was it easier than Toronto, or how do you compare both experiences,
Yeah,
Toronto and
well, yeah,
San
I think
Francisco?
it was easier for me, but then part of that is probably because I was older and I had more experience.
Mm,
Probably was a bit easier for me to find something. Whereas in Toronto, I was brand new, like I didn't have much experience at all. So, and then probably the confidence as well. This
yeah.
was my third big city that I'd moved to in the space of a few years. So I think I probably maybe came across a bit more confident in interviews and things like that. And
Mm.
I had more confidence to apply for bigger jobs. Whereas in Toronto, it was all like really sort of, you know, what would you call it? Like beginner or not
Just,
beginner, like lower level position.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-mm-mm. I see. Right.
Mm.
In your book, I we can really feel that you see that you've done a lot of research. There are a lot of statistics, and it's quite interesting, and it's amazing also the what you have found, and there are some statistics around research, especially around women and anxiety after birth trauma. You were saying that statistics show that 10% of women have experienced birth trauma, but you believe that it should be more like 90%.
Yeah.
Why do you think so?
Yeah, well, the first thing is that the 10% in the studies that it's found, these are just women that were willing to come forward and
Hmm.
participate in a study and actually be very honest about that. But I find from the hundreds of women at this point that I've spoken to, family members, friends, nurses, midwives, doctors, health visitors, like counselors, life coaches. Like I've spoken to so many women over the last couple of years, all who have had children themselves and all who deal with women who have had children. They're like nearly every woman that has had a child will have some form of trauma.
Mm.
And it's not to scare people who haven't had kids or who are thinking about it, because obviously, becoming a parent is an amazing gift. It's an amazing experience. And the birth experience can be very, like life-changing and beautiful and all of that. But it's not even about that. It's just to recognize that whether it's physical or emotional, that giving birth to a baby, whether it's naturally, air quotes, or by C-section or however it happens, um, that that is a traumatic event. So whether you're very happy at the end of it and you're like, this is the best thing ever, you still might be holding on to some physical trauma in your body from what's just happened because it's been a shock. So it's not trying to scare women or to paint it in a negative light. It's just to recognize that that is a big thing to go through. And I
Mm.
think I think a lot of women feel like they need to bounce back, or they need to, as soon as they come out of hospital or the birthing center or wherever they've given birth, that now their life as a mother starts, and that the birth journey is over and they just sort of forget about it. But I really think that lives with women for a long time, and especially if it didn't maybe go as planned and they feel like they can't talk to anyone about it, I think it can be very damaging. So
Hmm.
um yeah, I don't know. I think it's something that's not talked about enough. And I think women,
Hmm.
especially here in Ireland, I don't know what it's like in the rest of the world, so I'm only speaking from my experience, but I feel like there's a lot of shame around it, and a lot of, kind of feeling like if you have a healthy baby and you're healthy after the birth, then you shouldn't complain.
Yeah, you
You
should be
know,
happy,
yeah.
and that's it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I guess as you were saying, the difficulty to feel like you can speak out. And I have a friend who went through birth trauma as well, with her second child, her son, and she couldn't because it didn't go as planned
Yeah.
or what she had in mind. They changed. Well, it got a bit complicated, and she couldn't see her son. I think for the first couple weeks. I can't
Mm.
remember how long, but she couldn't see him, or it took her a long time to go through um, her trauma and the experience. And I think I can't remember how she went through and how she got the it triggered something in her head that she got better, but um, I don't think she got much support
Mhm.
at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is a lot of work to be done, definitely. And but now I feel that we are talking a bit more about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's still it's yeah, it shocked me to see the numbers, to see that actually it's much more than 10% experiencing birth trauma, definitely.
Yeah, that's not my that like that's just my experience, but
Yeah,
I think women are just afraid to talk about it, So then
yeah,
that's my hope, that with this book and by me being open about
yeah,
it,
yeah.
it'll make it a bit easier for women.
Mm. Yes, especially that it feels, and it's such a personal experience. You're gonna have women say, "Oh, I love being pregnant. I loved, I it didn't. It feel." Or often you hear, "Oh, you suffer," but then when you have the baby on you, it's everything's gone. Like all the pain, everything is gone. Well, I don't know.
No,
I've
I
never had this experience. Never
yeah,
gave birth, but is it really? I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
know.
I think
Yeah.
it's mixed emotions, and that's kind of the hardest
Yeah.
thing, because women, they have this beautiful newborn baby and they're
Yeah.
like, how could I feel so bad about the way they came into the world? It's very like
Yeah.
messes with your head. Yeah.
Yeah. And before they were saying they would call it the baby blues,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
just you're a little bit down, but
Mhm.
nothing to worry about. Yeah, it has this kind of meaning. So saying that but there is the word trauma in
Yeah.
it makes it a bit more it's taken more seriously, I would
Yeah.
say, by using
Yeah.
that term.
Yeah.
So, yes. And now I would like to talk about the will of life. I didn't know about this I don't know, assessment or this little tool, I would
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
reflecting on your when to give you a, a to pause and reflect on how you feel about your life at the moment.
Hmm.
And yes, so I would like to know, how did you come about this? How did you get to know this Wheel of Life, and how did it help you
Yeah,
at the
so
time?
the first time I came across the Wheel of Life, what age was I? I think maybe like late teens, maybe. I know I talked about this in the book. I can't remember exactly what age I was, but I went to my local library in
Hmm.
search of a self-help book. This was in my Dr. Phil era. I don't know if you remember him, the bald guy who used to have the chat show, like he was kind of like a male version of Oprah.
Ah, I see. Yeah,
Remember him?
maybe I've seen some videos. Yeah.
Yeah, so he used to have these guests on his show and
Hmm.
have like really sort of troubled circumstances, and he would kind of give them like kind of therapy, like on-stage therapy, and then, it was totally dramatized for TV, but I was obsessed
Yes.
when I was younger.
Was it an
So
American TV show?
yeah, it was
Was it
American. Yeah.
American? Yeah. Oh, they always dramatize. I
Yes,
love
they're
it.
obviously. So he always mentioned like different self-help books on it. So I took myself off to my local library thinking, oh, there's going to be an amazing self-help section. I'll like, get some great books in here. I think there was about two. There was two like self-help books in the whole library. I think it's slightly better now, but this is like what happens when you're from a small town. It's not even like a
Mm.
thing.
Yeah.
So I picked up a book. I can't remember the name of it, but when I took it home, there was a Wheel of Life in it, and that's when I first got introduced to the concept. So, if anyone's not familiar with it, it's basically a little wheel that you can either Google this. There's tons of examples
Yeah.
online, or you can use the one in my book, or you can draw your own, basically. So the idea is that you draw a wheel and you create kind of between 8 to 12 segments. And then you can either write it or draw a little picture or a symbol of different areas of your life. So the areas that, let me see if I can remember the ones I've used. Health,
Hmm.
um, relationships, I think, or
Yes.
love life, or yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Home, career, passion, finances, fun, and
Mm.
spirituality. Is that them all?
Yes.
Um,
I think that I tried to uh,
Personal growth, I think, was it?
go back to, yeah, to your lovely graphic, but I can't remember which where was it? Um, remember which chapter. The thing is, I have so many bookmarks that I have to
Oh
go
yeah, let
back
me
to.
see. I have it here. I'll see if
Um,
I can find it.
um, help people to visualize your concept. Social media.
I have it here. Liddy, do you want me to run through them?
Oh yes. Which page is it? So I can
20,
show it.
27.
27? Oh, so it was actually at the beginning. Oh yes, here he
Hmm.
is. Yeah, I think you said passion home as well.
Yes,
Yes,
can't
this
forget
is
about that.
it. Yes,
Yeah, so the idea is
lovely.
to go through the different areas in your life and
Hmm.
either use this or you can, if some of these don't apply to you as much as others, you can create your own.
Mm.
And then you rate each area, like how satisfied with you that you are with each area out of 10.
Hmm.
So the idea would be if you draw this on a piece of paper, you could shade in, like if it's a 6, you could kind of shade in where a 6 would be, or a 9 or a 3 or whatever it is.
Yes.
And then once you've done that, it kind of gives you a good visual representation of how balanced your life is. And
Mm.
I just find even doing that, even if you don't take any action right away from that, just seeing that can be so like eye-opening, and you
Mm.
realize that, oh, like I'm great, with my family and friends at the minute, but my health
Mm.
isn't actually great. So it sort of just gets you thinking about, what areas in your life are important to you, but you've been kind of neglecting, but maybe you haven't realized, you know. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, that's kind of how I would use it. And I would sort of do it maybe once a month, just as the kind
Hmm.
of check in, you know, are there certain things that I'm saying are a priority for me, but I'm not actually, you know, living in alignment with that. And
Mm.
I think it's a good place to start with goal setting. If you have a couple of areas that are eights and nines, maybe you don't need to focus on those as much. But
Yeah.
if you have areas that are like a two or a three, maybe that's a good place to start and to set
Yeah.
some goals in those areas.
Yes, and actually I did it online when you have the questions and you have the scale and you have to click on the
Oh yeah.
the number and it forces you to yes to stop for a moment and reflect on what's going on in your life and your life, and that helps you to actually realize and where you have to things that you want to improve, and it's a good way to kind of sort of um, um, yeah, get a feeling of where you at
Yeah.
and see how what trajectory, what direction you now are going to take. So can be helpful definitely if you want to have a go, and
Mhm.
I think it's yeah, it's a fun thing to do, and you're like, oh gosh, yeah, I you realize that there's some parts that you don't feel so happy about, but you didn't
Yeah.
take the time to address those yeah, those issues in your
Yeah.
life, sort of. Yeah. Um, so in your book, you talk about people around you not being very supportive in your choice to become a graphic designer. Can you tell us how you overcame their negative judgment and kind of um, uh, s- did not, yeah, how did you overcome these uh, challenges? Yeah, these
Um,
people.
Yeah, so when I talk about people, it wasn't so much family. My family were always very supportive and like my close friends and all of that. It was more so teachers and like certain people in school growing up.
Okay.
I found, and not even, I wouldn't say they were, you know, totally anti anything like that, but I just
Mm,
like growing up in school everyone
mm,
had the same mindset that to be successful, you have to get a serious job, or, you know,
mm,
like the goal was always to become a, like, I know this is such a cliche at this point, but to become a doctor or a lawyer or a
mm,
dentist or something that, you know, makes lots of money and, you know, you're going to be taken seriously. And when I was younger, from a young age, I always knew I wanted to do something in art or something creative.
mm,
And it was either interior design, graphic design. At one point, I wanted to be a makeup artist. And
mm,
I just kind of found that, you know, it was kind of looked down on with a lot of teachers, you know, sort of like, oh, well, why would you do that? Why would you throw your education away? Or you're smarter than that? Or, you know, like that
mm.
pay the bills in the long run. And I don't know. I just I think it probably has changed now. Like I think people are a lot more open-minded, but I
Yeah.
just felt like when I was growing up, it's sort of
Yes.
like this nearly this guilty pleasure that I loved art so much that I loved it, but I was in the back of my mind, I was kind of like, okay, I know, but I can't really do this. Like, you know, people aren't gonna approve of this, or I'm not gonna be taken seriously. So I think I was very lucky that my parents were very supportive, and my mum was a high school teacher. She's retired now, but I think that actually really helped because she said that she came across so many parents that were really pushy and that wanted their child, you know, to go into that more traditional job or career path, you know, because they're gonna, you know, make lots of money or whatever it was. So she kind of went the opposite way with us. Then she was not the opposite, but she was just like, whatever you want to do, we will support you 100%. So
Mm.
I was very lucky that I had that. And if I didn't have that, because I know a lot of my friends' parents were kind of, pushing them to do something that they thought was a more respectable career choice. So if I didn't have that, it might have ended up differently, but
Hmm.
very lucky that I had that choice. And I'm so glad I did now because I do know some people that have gone against their natural gut
Yes.
instinct and have done what their parents or their teachers advised them. And now yes, they've made lots of money, but they're miserable and they're not doing what their soul was calling them to do. So,
Um,
and I
and
know, yeah, sorry, I was just going to
yeah,
say,
yeah, yes.
I know this is kind of an overused sort of phrase that if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. But I do think there's so much truth to that. I think if you are someone who's highly creative, and I think we all have that in us, to some degree, but if you've something that you love, you will find a way to make a career out of it and to make money out of it. It'll just because that passion is going to keep you going every single day. Like if you become a lawyer or a doctor, not to hate on the lawyers and doctors, but if you become, I'm just picking this as an example, if you become that because your parents or a teacher advises you to do that, but it's not what you're passionate about, you can maybe go a couple of years doing that. But yeah, if you don't have that drive and that passion, there's nothing is going to get you out of bed in the morning and you're just going to end up being miserable. So, yeah.
Yeah. And actually, so these people that you were saying, they follow the career path of what their
Mm.
parents wanted.
Yeah.
So they're still doing the job today, and they're not. They haven't come to this realization that, or they haven't got the strength to do what they like, or what do you know about how they feel about the job?
Yeah. Some of them are still in the same jobs and they're kind of just getting on with it. They have kids and stuff and
Okay.
they're kind of maybe
Yeah.
taking any other option at this stage, which is quite sad.
Mm.
And some of them did switch, but then, yeah, I think it's just maybe the later in life you leave it to switch to do something that you love, maybe the harder it can be.
Hmm.
Because you're kind of so
True.
used to, having the money or whatever, the stability, I suppose.
Yes.
So I am just very glad that now, not to say my career path has been ideal. It certainly hasn't. I've had tons of different jobs and I've had ups and downs
Yeah.
but I think it was all kind of in the pursuit of passion and finding something that I
Yeah.
love. So I think if that's your end goal, you can never go wrong. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Now, how do you feel now about the stage of your career? Because now you work for yourself, and you've well create your independence. So, how do you feel about the stage you're at? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think this is probably the happiest I've been like in my career. Um and it hasn't happened overnight. Like it's taken a long time to get to this stage.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy working for myself because I yeah, I don't know. When I look back to times where I was working in an office environment, I'm just like, oh my God, that was so not for me. Like I
Mm.
I feel like I work best alone, probably the introvert in me. I do a lot of work on my own. Not to say that I don't like being around people, I do, but like in an office environment, I found it quite hard to be constantly surrounded by people.
Yeah,
Um,
especially open spaces
yeah,
and
on
things like
time and
that.
all that. Yeah. So I am very happy working for myself, but there is also obviously more risk that comes along with that,
Yeah.
because of the financial side as well. So I think I've got it to a good balance now where
Hmm.
I feel like I've sort of figured out the financial side, but I'm still able to, have that freedom and creativity.
Yes.
So, yeah, but it's just constantly trying to make little tweaks and, get the balance.
Mm. I see. Yeah, it's not easy. How long you've been working for yourself now?
Let me see, 6 years, almost
Six
6.
years. Yeah. The more I'm into well, the entrepreneurial world and all that, and I listen to podcasts and read books and all that, and you listen to people. I think it takes usually over 10 years. It takes 10
Yeah,
years to kind of make it feel like
yeah,
you are where you want to be, or you feel happy or content with your career or your what you've built. So
yeah,
yeah, it's a long road. It is, but it's exciting. I feel now it's only a year that I've started the book club, but it's I'm really excited, or I've never felt that for any other job, like creating something from nothing, and
yeah,
so it really feels like a little baby that you see grow and year after year. So yeah,
yeah.
it's
And it's because you
amazing.
have the passion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We go back to that again, definitely, and have the mindset, I think. I think because uh, before I had before started things, creative stuff, and let it and gave up quickly because
Yeah,
I didn't have the mindset, because I think it's the combination of both that helps you to keep going, because that's the
yeah,
harder. Having ideas is amazing, but then came comes in the doubt, and you're like, what am I doing? That really, but this thing is really going to matter, or is this really a thing that's going to um, that can be done, you see? Is it really, is it a real thing? Can you do that really for real? So there are always those doubts that comes in, and this is where you need a good reminder all the
yeah.
time that yes, if you look at this didn't exist before and now, so you always have to remind yourself.
Mhm.
So it's yeah, it's not always easy. Um, so at the beginning of the podcast, I was saying that we met in a conference about money mindset, and you by Denise Duffield Thomas. Can you tell us about your relationship to money, and why did you feel that you needed to work on that? Because it's you talk a little bit about it, and also related to that conference that we went to.
Oh, okay. Let me think. Um, Relationship to money. Yeah, that's kind of tricky. I suppose I'd say it's good now. I have a pretty
Yeah.
good relationship with money now, but when I was younger and over the years, maybe wasn't so good. I think
Mm,
I mentioned earlier talking about living with my parents
yes.
before I moved to Canada. I think that sort of highlighted kind of the weird relationship I had with money when I moved there, because I felt up to that point that I had, you know, like I probably relied on my parents for a lot. And then that was the first time I had been on my own and needed to fend for myself. And it was very scary. So, yeah, probably maybe wasn't the best, looking back at my childhood. I was the youngest, and my sisters always said that I was spoilt. So I probably was as
Uh-huh.
maybe that didn't serve me very well then when I was like shot into adulthood. But yeah, so I'm glad I experienced that. I had 8 years living abroad of like kind of making it on my own. So I'm really glad I did that, because if I was just to go from living with my parents and always kind of, being this, like having them to fall back on, I don't think I would have gained that independence.
Mhm.
So I suppose there are times where I can fall back into that, and I sort of think, oh, well, I don't need to worry about money or someone else will look after it or, my husband. And I know that's not good, because a big value of mine is to have like complete independence in every area of life and to kind of be a role model for my daughter and the other women around me. So I think I need to keep reminding myself of that, that is a big goal for me. Um,
Mhm.
but then I think it's a fine line between that and then like hustling your ass off and burning out just for
Yeah,
money. So
yeah,
yeah, so I'd say my
it's,
relationship with money is good, but I do need to remind myself,
yeah.
at times not to go too far either way.
Mm, mm. Yes, again, we have to check on ourselves all the time and yeah, reset kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, push the reset button.
Yes.
Um, Page 53, you're saying that there is a direct correlation between learning and mental health. And I
Mhm.
quite liked that idea. Could you expand a bit more on that about the reading that you've done around this? Because I think there is a
Yeah.
research, yeah.
Yeah, oh, totally. I feel like learning is just such a lifelong passion for me, and I know you're probably the same, Liddy.
Mm,
And I think that when we finish school or we finish university and we're thrown into, corporate world or
mm,
careers, a lot of the time the learning kind of like, yes, you would be doing some kind of learning, but a lot of the time the learning for enjoyment kind of stops. So I really would encourage people to like learn like whatever form that is, reading books, listening to podcasts, doing online courses. I do something every single day. I will take at least an hour to do something like where I'm learning something. And not just like passively watching a course or reading a book or listening to a podcast. I will also have a little notebook where I will jot down notes, so then I feel like that makes things like stick in your mind more. So then
yeah.
I'll be more likely to use that information and apply it to my own life rather than just passively consuming this content. And in terms of relating it back to mental health, I know from my experience, I have really noticed that if like I said, after my daughter was born, I stopped reading. And before that, I was such an avid reader. I read every single night for years, and mostly self-help books. But I just kind of lost that spark after she was born. And I would say that maybe contributed to the anxiety and the insomnia. So I know that anytime that I'm learning or engaging my mind in something, it just really does wonders for my mood and my mental health. And I think everyone can benefit from it in whatever format that looks
Mm.
like.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. I think it's in in this passage that you talk about your dad learning. What was it? Learning on YouTube or Pinterest or something like
Interesting. Oh,
that.
both. Yeah, yeah.
That was lovely. I loved it. Yeah, as well. Make it very personal.
Never too old.
Yeah. So towards the end of the book, you talk on I go back on a more serious topic. When you were younger, that you had suicidal thoughts. You had so when you were younger. So can you tell us how you reached that point, especially for um, young people who are maybe going through bullying or having, social media and all that are very okay, are often the cause of suicide and everything. So, can you explain to us what happened to you in that
Um,
point?
yeah, so I would say from, let me see, about what age, maybe 18 to 24, right
Mm,
before I moved to Canada, I experienced pretty bad social anxiety and depression. On and off, it wasn't kind of came and went in waves throughout that 6 year period. But back then, I know I say I'm an avid reader and really into self-help books and all of that now, but back then I wasn't really. I didn't really know this whole, industry even existed. So I didn't even know there was a name for it. I didn't
Hmm.
know. I thought I was the only person to ever experience feelings like this. And again, going back to the feelings of shame that I felt after my daughter was born, like I couldn't tell anyone about this because I didn't want to be a burden. And I think what made it like more strange to me is that I didn't really have anything like social media wasn't really that big when I was that age. Like I would have maybe
Yeah.
just Facebook possibly,
Mm.
but it wouldn't have been, as big of an issue as it is now. I was bullied actually when I was younger. My younger years, I'd say from maybe like 8 to 12, I was bullied. So I don't know, maybe it was some of that resurfacing.
Mm.
But yeah, I just remember I had graduated university and I was working as an assistant manager in a retail store. And, the job's fine and all that. But I just felt like such a failure that, I would never be able to get. I know, I feel like I was just catastrophizing a lot of things in my
Mm.
mind. Like I would never be able to get a job in interior design or doing something that I loved. And I just had no confidence. I really had no self-esteem. I hated myself, just everything. I just was extremely hard on myself. And I remember I was living with my parents at the time. I remember going to the doctor at age 22 and she was just not helpful at all. It wasn't my usual doctor, but she basically told me there was nothing wrong with me and maybe I had mild anxiety and to
Mm.
just go and talk to a friend and I would be fine. And I remember coming out of that and just being like, what? Like it had taken every ounce of
Mm.
strength that I had to go to that doctor. Like I
Mm.
literally thought about this for years, but I was too scared to go because back then I remember thinking um that this is how crazy like how naive I was back then, but I thought whatever was on my medical records that my employers could have access to that. I know like that's crazy, but
Oh,
I just thought like I don't want
yeah.
there to be any record of this, so I was too scared to go.
Oh,
But then
wow.
it got so bad. I know now that that's not the case, obviously. When you're that age, it's kind of you don't know.
You
You're
don't
like,
know.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I it just got so bad that I was like, I actually don't care. I need like some help here. And then I just kind of felt really like disheartened and like, what am I going to do? Like that was my last shot at, getting help with this. So I remember coming out to the car and just driving. I didn't know where I was going or what my next move was here. And just at that point, I actually did feel suicidal. And it feels strange talking about it now because I know a lot of young people are going through like really traumatic things. They are being bullied or,
Mm.
social media pressures and all of that. And like back then, there was nothing really obvious that was happening to me. So it made it even harder for me to understand like why I was feeling like this. I felt like I should have been grateful, that I have a good family and all of this and I
Yeah.
have a job and
Yeah.
yeah, but I just don't know. I couldn't figure it out. So I got into the car and I ended up at my local shopping center. And I walked into the shopping center with the intent of going to a pharmacy. I didn't really know what my plan was, but
Mm.
I couldn't go on feeling like this. And as I was walking to the pharmacy, I came across a bookshop called Waterstones. I don't know if you have them in France.
Y-
You have them?
No, but I know in
Yeah.
England they do. Yeah. Love it. Love
Yeah,
this
so
shop.
I wandered in here. I don't actually think I'd ever even been in it before, but I came across this book by Paul McKenna. Do you know who he is? The a British hypnotist.
No, I think it's just, I think you mentioned it in your
Yeah,
book, but
yeah,
yeah. I do. Yeah, I didn't know him before.
yeah. So, might sound a bit strange, like a book by a hypnotist, but he does so much more than that. Like he really helps people,
Mm.
different mental health issues. So his latest book had just been released and it was on a stand on its own. So it was
Mm.
called I Can Make You Confident.
Mm.
And I just remember seeing it and being like, oh my God, I don't know what this book is about, but it just, like, I was just drawn to it. So I went over and I
Mm.
read the back of it and then I went and bought it. And something inside me just told me that just go home and read this book and don't do anything,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
you do anything else. So I went home and read that book over the next day or two, maybe, and it was amazing. It was honestly, I feel like there was something, I
Mm.
don't know, the universe or whatever put me in that place to go and pick up,
Mm.
put that book in front of me to go and pick up.
Mm.
So back then, there was a CD with it. That's how long ago it was. There was a CD, like that there was like hypnosis tracks on it to listen to
Mm.
fall asleep. So I listened to them every night as I was going to sleep, and I was doing all of the exercises he had in it, and that really helped me get through that phase. Like it was incredible. Like over the next few months, I just felt so much better. So that's why now I think I'm so passionate about self-help and reading and learning and, taking things into your own hands because, you know, like I'm sure I'm not the only person that's gone to a doctor that has been dismissed. So I think it's just so empowering to know that obviously everyone's like situation's different and some people may have more extreme issues than I had, but
Mm.
I think it's empowering to know that there are things you can do out there that can help in some way.
Yes, and this is where you see, you understand the power of reading, of books.
Yeah.
And I love your phrase, you become the books you read. Uh, so you can really see the power of reading, the power of books. And did you know about um, the concept of bibliotherapy?
I've heard of it. Yes.
Yeah.
Really.
It's something that I came across. So apparently they subscribe, no, not subscribe. They assign, they assess you, or you have people who would, they're like, I don't know, coaches, book coaches, I don't know, um that would advise you to read certain books about depending on how you feel and what you need, they will give you a book, a certain book
Oh,
to read.
that's
So
amazing.
yeah, there's actually someone that I follow on Instagram who is specialized in
Yeah.
bibliotherapy.
Oh, I'm gonna
Yeah,
write that down. I'm gonna look that up.
yes.
Yeah.
So maybe it costs less than a therapist
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
than would cost a therapist, but it's it's a concept that might help.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and it's interesting also to know about your relationship with reading. And so you said that you read a lot of self-help books when at some point, and then you stopped, and then back again.
Yeah.
Um, are they other books that how do you feel about now about reading? Do you still read self-help books, or do you read fiction? Can you tell us about
Yeah, I
your
still read
reading?
self-help. Um, Fiction, I I wish I was someone who could get into fiction more because I do
Yeah.
enjoy it when I'm reading it. But I find that, like, when I say self-help, they're not all strictly self-help. Some of them are like books about business or marketing or productivity or something like, kind of life design, nearly that sort of thing. I
Mm-hmm.
label them all as self-help. But I find if I'm reading a fiction book, it really depends. If I'm going on holidays, I could read fiction,
Mm.
but I find having self-help or something like that, like on an average day, gets me motivated and gets me really kind of fired up to be productive and that sort of thing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Fiction, I find, is better for me if I'm like totally want to switch off, if I'm going on holidays or nighttime, maybe. Yeah.
I see. So more as a form of escapism
Yeah, yeah,
than on the. So it would be more punctual than not punctual. Yeah, punctual than actually regular. Your regular reading would be more self-help or around design. That's what I was saying.
yeah.
Yeah. Mm. And what do you think about reading in another language? Because we
Hmm.
read here for people, non-native
Yeah.
speakers in my book club. And have you ever read from a non-speaking, English-speaking author? What's your experience reading in another language? Have you read any, I don't know, short books or yeah, or at least an author from a non uh, well translated book, for example, that from someone that wrote in a foreign language
I'm trying to
and read
think.
in English.
I have read books in different languages, but again, it's years ago, like
Uh-huh.
school times. But
Yes.
that's a good challenge. I probably should try that. Yeah. Have you any recommendations?
Well,
Art?
I don't know. Did you read what language did you read in?
Well, I don't want to embarrass myself, but I did read in French,
Ah, nice.
but a long time ago. Like I mean,
Yeah,
what age? 15 was probably the oldest I read anything in French. And
yeah.
Irish was the other language.
Yes, or another language. Yes, or Irish or other local regional language perhaps. But so you read, was it for your A preparation of your A level, or do you remember what you read, or so long ago?
I don't remember. Sorry, I should maybe try and see if I can find that out. No, I don't remember.
But you
Yeah.
remember, at least you
Yes.
remember that you read this a book. Was it the entire book?
Uh, probably maybe not. Maybe just a few chapters. I
Just,
don't know. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, Yes, because I think that reading, I don't know how you feel about it, but the fact of reading a translated book, it can be a little bit tricky sometimes because they're not necessarily they're an interpretation of
Yeah.
sometimes there are expressions and you can't really translate in another language, but you get into a different culture and you get to know another way of living or another way of thinking. And I think that reading books, for example, I read this book, The Kite Runner. It's a book about this young boy learn in and when was it in Pakistan? Yes, because in Pakistan they have this a culture of kite. They like to fly kites,
Yeah.
and when I read this book, it was well, the author is from Pakistan, and he wrote in English, and so I read it in English, and it was so eye-opening about this world and this country and the culture and getting to know about the conflict and everything. So yes, it's helping to get to know other culture or helping you in your whether if it's self-help like you experienced throughout your life. It's books are open you to open your mind to other worlds.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
and
And
it
Can I just ask you, would
Yeah,
you
yeah.
recommend, so if I was to read a book in French, would I need to brush up on my French before reading it, or do you think it helps to read first, like to start reading? Which way do
I would say, oh, that's a tricky
you think?
question because it depends how you feel about your level. I would say to start with something that maybe a book that you've read in English, and then read it in French,
Oh, it's a good idea.
about something that you like.
Yeah.
Definitely something, start with something that you're interested in. And you know, I started reading in English when I started reading nonfiction.
Hmm.
Actually, this is how it wasn't self-help, it was this book from Lena Dunham, you know, the
Oh,
creator
yes,
of
yes,
Girls.
yes, I do.
And it was at the time 2014, I think. And it was this big thing around the TV show Girls. It was a big hit. And I was so into the show. And she had just released this book about her life, sort of creative writing journey and everything. And I really wanted to know about her, more about her, because I was so amazed that such a young woman could become the director of a TV show. I was so amazed about the fact that she had written the show, directed the show, and
Really?
she was playing as well, and in it. She, well, she was the main character, I guess. Well, with her the other girls, but yeah. So I was so yes, in awe of how she accomplished. But then you understand, okay, her parents are from the art world and all that. So you understand that um, she the confidence that she probably acquired from being around artists and this creative and world, but it's still a journey. And anyway, it was the first book that I read, so I would recommend maybe start with someone that you already know, so that you already know the universe, that or the kind of the world of that person, the context, or maybe a story. I know that the Three Musketeers is often I don't know if it's your if your style, but I know that it's a popular story
Yeah.
if you like fiction, but nonfiction, yeah, or maybe a book. You know, that could be an interesting thing. Would be to if you read a book in English, that nonfiction self-help book, for example, that
Yeah.
also exists in French,
Yes.
that you read, and then reading it in French.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
could be a good start.
That's going to be my next challenge.
Yes. Oh, I would love. You have keep me to keep me in the loop, or to tell me about it if you start reading.
Yes. So
Yeah, definitely message me if you start reading in French.
hold
I
me
would love
accountable.
to know about your journey. But yes, definitely. But also maybe try to get into in order to get yourself into back into French, because I probably it's been a while that you haven't heard or spoken French, maybe. So if you start watching TV shows, or there is a great TV show called The Agency, I think.
Oh
The
yes,
Agency.
I have watched it before. Isn't it
Did
like
you
Selling Sunset?
say again?
Is it a bit like Selling Sunset?
Selling Sunset. I don't know about this show.
Is it like a property show?
Ah, no. Oh,
Okay.
well, you have that. You can watch this, definitely. It's about it's called The Agency in English. Maybe. I was that's like reality TV show, more
Yes.
like.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
it's not that one then.
It's yeah, and it's great. So you watched that one.
Yeah.
Ah, nice. No, I was talking about this show when in it's about a casting agency, actors.
Oh, okay.
Um, and in French it's called 10% because it's the 10% that the
Oh,
the
yes.
agency, the casting
Yes.
agency get. Um, uh, if you type French TV show, you'll probably
Yeah,
find it on Netflix.
a good
But
idea.
yeah, maybe try to watch it in French and with subtitles. Yeah, that can be a good way for you to get back into French. I
Yeah.
always recommend TV
I'm
show.
going to Disneyland Paris in March, so I'll be able to practice.
Oh yes, yes, definitely. When is it? In March, you said?
March, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. How
Mhm.
nice. So this
Oh,
way you can get back into it so you can you'll be able
fair.
to speak a little bit some French.
Yeah, sounds good.
Ah, yeah, definitely. Well, let me know if you have any other questions about that. Definitely don't hesitate to message me
Thank you.
about it. So yes, now, well, to finish off, talking about about books, still, would you what you recommend quite a few books in your book,
Yeah.
which if you had to pick one or two, which one would you recommend people to read?
Um, well, I think one of my favorite books, self-help books of all time, is The Power of Habit by
Okay.
Charles Duhigg. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. Um,
Mm-hmm.
do you know this book?
Nope, but I'm interested. Tell me more.
It's amazing. I read it, let me see, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, but I've read it a couple of times since that. And
Oh,
it's one book that I always recommend. I recommend it to everyone. I've gifted it to so many people. So there's another book called Atomic Habits by James
oh
Clear.
yes, I
You know
know
it.
about it. I haven't read it, but yeah,
So
it's
it's
big.
amazing as well. But
Yeah.
The Power of Habit, I feel like was the original Habit book. It was out before Atomic Habits, so I always like
Uh-huh.
prefer it. But
Okay.
it just I like feel like that book has changed my life. It's just I don't even know how to describe it. Like no matter like if you look at your life, everything that you are doing on a daily basis, it all comes down to habits.
Mm-hmm.
Um the author basically talks about rather than if you want to change a habit, like if you want to, for example, stop smoking, stop drink or cut down on drinking or cut out chocolate or whatever, or you start exercising, whatever the habit is, he says that most people go about it the wrong way. They try and use willpower. But he says that is actually the hardest way to do it because trying to use willpower to change something is going to use up all of your energy. It's going to make it really difficult if you're relying on willpower. So he says the easiest way to make a change is to actually just make whatever you want to change. So rather than eating chocolate, eating fruit, for example, you have to make that a habit. So
Mm.
it'll take a few days, to rather than reaching for chocolate, for reaching for an apple. But after the few days, it'll become like locked into your subconscious and you'll do it automatically. So it won't be using up any of your willpower, any of your decision making. It's automatic. So he says you can use this for every aspect of your life. So I have used that for everything. And I always like think about that. If I'm struggling with something, I'm like, how can I just make this a habit? And then it'll run on
Mm.
autopilot. So I love that book. I think it's amazing. Um,
Ah, I'm intrigued now.
yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, I see. Okay. Well, that's a good tool if you want to change
Mm.
something in your life. Nice. Thank you. I noted, and thank you for this insight of the book. Well, Katie, I see that you've been listening to us. If you have a question don't hesitate to leave your question in the chat box or maybe open your mic. I would say it's just us. So, or if you're too shy to speak, you can click on you can message. Oh, yes,
Hello.
Jasmine. Hello. So, Kitty, how did you feel about about the conversation? Tell me how did you experience the conversation
Oh,
and
thank
the
you very
topic?
much for the book presentation. It was very lovely, and I'm very interested. I was searching if I can buy this book on Amazon, but it is not possible.
No, not yet, unfortunately. I need to look into it and make it available. So I will keep in touch with Liddy and she can let you know.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, because on the website of well the publisher Sean Way Press, it just says
Um,
UK I think or UK and
yeah, but
Ireland.
even if I can send you a copy directly, Katie,
Yes,
if you give your address to Liddy, I could send you a copy like directly. Yeah.
yeah, it will be nice. Thank you.
Oh
Yep.
well. Perfect. Amazing. Do you have another question, Kitty, about the conversation and the topics?
No, it was so nice to hear about how did you get started and what was your idea. It was very nice to hear about it. Yes, I don't have a question. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you for
Well,
joining us. Glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
yeah, well, I'm glad you were able to join us today and that you find the conversation inspiring. I definitely found your book inspiring, and I applied many tools and thank you for writing it, showing that um, we can write a book that you were able to do it. So it shows that if you have the determination and the passion for it, we can do it. Everyone can do it. So thank you for that. Um, and well, I hope that now that so the video will be available on YouTube. So I hope that it will reach out more people. So when I will post the video, I will let you know so that you can share it as well and yeah, share it to people around. It was a real pleasure to have you, Emma, on the podcast, our first guest, official guest.
Thank you.
Um, and yes, thank you so much for this conversation and your sharing your experiences and all uh, the things that you went through. It wasn't always easy to topics that are easy to talk about, but thank you for opening up and sharing your experience. Um, I wish you a beautiful rest of the day, and I hope that we'll be able to see each other very soon, Emma. I hope one day. Um, and yes, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Liddy. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you again, and I will hope that yeah, you had a great time. Thank you. Have a
Okay.
nice end of the day. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.